What's up, and welcome back to another episode of the Barcode Collective podcast. It's Jacob Saldana checking in from the Spacebar Wellness Loft, where we do a little personal training. We do a little bit of, I don't want to put anybody in a box, but a little spiritual coaching, little ultrasonic cavitation. Go a little bit of detail because that's a big word. Who knows what that even means? But it all happens up here in the loft, and today it's a podcast studio. So this is where we are. I have the beautiful Floraina 3Hawk joining me. Welcome.
Thank you.
And really excited to have this conversation. I mean, there's a lot about you that I don't know. I just know you've been through some things. Typically, those who have been through a lot and who successfully, or at least willing to work through some of those challenges, become pretty awesome people, you know, and you definitely are. You know, every time I look at you, I physically see my sister, and then I feel like you are an extension of my family too. And you know, very comforting energy and spirit that you bring to Space Bar. And I often like to call you Mama Bear, you know, just a very maternal energy that I think everybody picks up here and gravitates towards, because ain't nothing like a mother's hug.
That's right.
So yeah, here as well at Space Bar, you do some holistic healing, some spiritual coaching, and you lead the charge in regards to that. I mean, when I first, you know, created Space Bar, it was actually something that I was kind of intentionally avoiding to a little, you know, just because I, you know, with some of the services that we do here within like the wellness space, you know, with breath work, or, you know, breath control, or any of these particular services, ice baths, saunas, oftentimes isn't really rooted in like the science behind it. And therefore I just tended to kind of naturally sway too far away from that, and left out some of the more spiritual components of this. So, you know, when we met and we got to kind of interact, and I got to know you a little bit more, I thought it was just going to be a great marriage in bringing some of that in, which really was lacking. It kind of was, you know, the soul of the space, I guess, was somewhat missing. So, just want to acknowledge you for all that you've brought to the table here, and just want to show my appreciation. So with all that being said, I would want to use this opportunity to get to know you a little bit more, and maybe just give a little bit of background of like your origin story, and you know, where you come from, and whatever you want to highlight in this you know, telling of your own story here.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate them. I appreciate you. It's been a beautiful experience coming in here and getting to know Space Bar Wellness as a collective team, and seeing the passion that you put into everything you do here. A little bit about me. My name technically is Floraina 3Hawk, and I was born in California. But I have led an incredibly traumatic life, starting generally in the womb. So it's been a rocky road for sure. And I think leading up to everything that I've done in this time frame has everything to do with that. It's made me a very strong woman, and has let me see and connect to so many others who were in the same boat in some way or another in their life. And it's brought me to many passions. So a little bit about me, I guess. I am Native American and mixed with Sardinian, which is also another mix in the European world, with Hungarian as well. But I have a deep root in my Native American culture. Technically, I'm Kizh and Navajo.
Okay.
And I was pretty much born into medicine womanship. So in the culture, you're born into this by having particular gifts or understandings of life at a very young age. And it takes you into this journey where you decide to be on a path to help others. And it is a constant learning road. And you take everything that is given to you in life and you use it as a tool to help others. And I tell people, honestly, I can go back as far as remembering my birth. I understand.
Wow.
So it's quite a weird story. I don't know if you guys want to hear
Let's
that.
hear it. I want to hear it. Yeah, absolutely.
So many people like to say at the end of their life, they look into this tunnel, they see a bright light. And funny enough, when I was being born, I understood and I saw a light going into my life. So I saw that bright light coming into the world. I remember my first breath and seeing faces above me. I remember being held and being frightened and understanding that it was new. After that, I remember many things about places I shouldn't be aware of or know of incidences happening. I did not leave the hospital right away. I had a lot of trauma from my parents. They did not raise me. I was adopted and kind of passed along quite a bit. So the first traumas were in the womb when my mother actually tried to stab her own stomach.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's already a hard pill to swallow when you feel unloved from the womb.
And was some of that, was that information passed on to you like later in life? Or does that mean that, is that even something that you, picked up that early on in the womb?
So in the womb, I can say that I understood the unwantedness. There was abandonment from that point, but I did not know the depth of that. I found that out after, honestly, through communications with a lot of family members and understanding everyone's story, because later in life, I really wanted to understand the truth and all sides and really make sure I was making the right understandings of who I am, where I came from, and why these things happened. And I vetted everything and made sure that I understood so I didn't make assumptions. So I knew that it was hard coming into this world. My father was not capable. They were both about 17 when I was born. So I was born early and didn't want to leave the hospital for like 3 months. So premature, very tiny, wasn't expected to do well. And now I'm a monster.
Please, you're a monster when you're working out. When we do this Spartan race together, I've seen that.
And so coming off of that, it was already a struggle, but she gave me up right out of the hospital and with nothing really, and gave me to my father. We lived in the car for a while. I was homeless as an infant. And I remember watching him do things and understanding his world was very hard, filled with drugs and thievery and everything you can think of in that life. And so I was passed around a lot. I ended up staying with his family and, tried my best and had lots of cousins and found joy in those things too, but kept going back to trauma. He would pick me up and take me with him. And I ended up being subject to sexual abuse at about 2 years old. It was the first time. And that was, with, again, a very deep understanding of I know I'm being hurt, but at the same time, really opening my sexual awakening at such a young age. It was a very deep trauma that would start in my life of not understanding what's good and, for the spirit, for the body, for the mind. I don't really look at things as good or bad, so I understand that everything happens with a deep purpose, and I see that now, but it is traumatic for the young child.
I think, yeah, for sure, for anybody in that age when, that's pretty wild. At what point did some of these things happen, and did your mindset shift again to like say, oh, there's no good, there's no bad, at what point did that come along, or even say some of those earlier memories as these traumatic things were coming? Like, did you already have a sense, or could you even look at things with that level of understanding?
So I definitely did not understand that at that age, of course. I didn't realize until I was in my mid 20s, actually, did I really see that there's there's no real such thing as good and bad. There's only experiences. Some are harsh, and we have to look at it as an experience and a lesson of sorts. We take from it what we want to, and we make it our own. And for me, it turns out that everything that I've been through, because that's just the tip of the iceberg, it has let me be able to sit in front of somebody and say, I see you and I understand you and I can walk with you through your pain and your traumas.
Mm. So I guess, like you said, some of that understanding maybe came, when you're like in the 20s, or were there any particular healing practices that you were experiencing that allowed you to kind of, see things in a different way, or what was that? What that journey look like for you?
So, jumping forward to that time frame, I actually was in the throes of the last time that I had cancer. And I, at that point, was told that it was pretty bad enough where I had to get my orders in or affairs in order, sorry. And I thought, I have nothing else right now. I'm going to do things that I never thought would benefit me, things that I already knew of because I was taught that holistic medicine is powerful. I was taught about herbalism. I was taught about, different types of things that are on this other side of the medical field that I just thought, it's just silly things that my family taught me. Mm-hmm. And I dove in and I just said, I'm going to take this part of myself and I'm going to look into the ceremonies. I'm going to look into Temazcal and cleanse myself and purge myself of all this stuff that I've been walking around with because it was poisoning me. I knew it. I felt sad all the time, but I would smile at everybody and make sure that everyone was so happy around me. And that's part of my nurturing side. I want everyone to be coddled and loved because that's what I wanted. I needed to be loved and wanted. So I decided to go down to, and it wasn't the first time. I've studied with the Mayans and done Temazcal trainings and like different things when I was younger. But it was the first time that I really went and did it solely for the purpose of not learning, but for myself. And my mindset was at this place of, I'm going to do anything and everything to change how I feel about myself and what I think and the power that I have to heal. Mm-hmm. And I went there and I spent almost 6 hours in a Temazcal one day. And I was pushed to a point where I dove in so deeply into my shadows, my darkness. I talked about things that I had not wanted to say to a single soul. And it in a sense, helped me clear my mind and clear my heart, clear the guilt that I carried with myself. And it pushed me to a point where I no longer had to retain it. And it was releasing and it was beautiful. And I followed a strict regimen or diet, which was mostly plant-based at that time. Not to say that eating meat was a bad thing. It's just when we want to cleanse our bodies, our minds, and our hearts, it's good to be free from some of the overstimulations of the modern day, which is sugars and caffeines and meat, which is hard to digest in most bodies nowadays. And, even recreational drugs like smoking or alcohol or any of those things, even plant medicines. So I went on a very strict diet. I strictly did a protocol of certain breath work, which at the time was not popular in any way. It was something that the shamans and medicine people that I know were doing to induce like types of meditation and trance-like states.
That's all like very powerful. And I mean, did you pursue some of that other healing modalities? Because you committed to the Western practices, and you tried all that, and here you are, dealing with another bout of cancer, and it's just like feeling like, trying to taking maybe some power back into, going on your own pursuit and seeking out other modalities that you, like you said, you knew of. Do you think that played a role in you, like really committing to that and like feeling like you had nothing else to lose, and seeing what this whole other side of things could have produced for you?
Yes, I definitely did at that point. I took myself serious and my gifts serious at that point because I always knew I was quite different. I spent my life being told I was different. As a child, when you go to someone and say, Grandma came to visit me before she died and told me where her will is, and they freak out, you're different. But they pretty much have made me feel outside of the box where I always try to hide all of that. So grasping on to that side of myself, I always pushed aside. And then when I finally dove in, it resonated so highly for me, and it became such a big part of who I was. I was no longer afraid to speak to it and speak to other people about it. And it really helped me, again, take back my power and hone in on the higher vibrations of life itself. And when you're in that higher state of vibration, your body can do amazing things. Your mind, your heart can do amazing things, and it heals.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I 100% believe in that. And, I typically talk about that through the pathway of like the nervous system, and just like seeing how things can change, and like you mentioned, heal themselves when you put yourself in the right space to do so. And I've been lucky, I guess, to this point to not deal with very many medical issues personally, but things have manifested within my body of like different pains, whether it was like back pain and, there were the hip pains or whatever it might be, that are significant and very uncomfortable and just not a pleasant thing to necessarily live through. And just feeling like there was a shot that I needed to get, or something or I wasn't working out enough, or whatever it might be, when in reality it was just like I wasn't learning how to calm myself down. So my body was just in this constant tensed up mode. And, for some that manifests probably in cancers, or, gastrointestinal issues, or, whatever it might be. For me, it manifested in locked up back, which, whatever it was. So actually, leaning into a practice of breath work for myself, of just learning how to just calm myself down over time. I would say probably about a year of consistent practice. All of a sudden, my back pain goes away, and now being able to at least be in tune enough with when I start getting a little more worked up and stressed out, I can pretty much predict like when my back or my hip is going to flare up, because it's been a tough week, and I can like feel that in my chest. And then before I know it, everything else just kind of locks up, and then it takes a little time to get back to that. So at that level, I mean, I've experienced a lot of it, and that's amazing to hear. So maybe you mentioned the Temescal a couple of times. Maybe describe what that is. I've experienced it, and it's a version of it, I guess. But tell me what a Temescal actually is.
Absolutely. So Temescal is much like a sweat house. So in the Mayan culture, we call it Temescal, but sweat lodge in the more Navajo sense. So it is a really intensely hot space that we do as a community to sweat out toxins, for one, because I believed in cleansing their cells to a point where we can kill off bacteria, make sure that all sicknesses come out. It was a way of cleansing and purging, and also to purify ourselves when we were going to go into battle, or when we were going to go into a deep prayer for like the land, to purify before going into relationships or joining clans. It was a really beautiful way to cleanse. And nowadays, it's also a way to purge ourselves of energetic blockages within ourselves, because we are so wrapped up in the chaos. And you made a great point. Now you're able to look at yourself and say, I had this hard week. I understand that I have all this stress trapped in my body. And you can check in, and you're being attentive and acknowledging it. So therefore you can jump ahead and do these things and go into ice baths and saunas, much like a sweat house, and sweat it out and aid in the inflammation and stuff. So the Temazcal, there's two ways to do it. There's one where we're honoring something and we're singing songs and we're, bringing creation and different things like that as a community and sharing the experience. And then there's the other way where we're doing deep shadow traumatic work, where you go in and you're opening the 4 doors of life and you're going through your existence and you're cleaning house essentially. And it is a very deeply emotional and powerful way to create this rebirthed self. And when you exit that Temazcal, you come out reborn because the Temazcal represents the womb of a woman or creation, and you're born new. So you come out and you're rinsed off in this beautiful flower bath and to cool you down, obviously, in your brain. Or you jump into a body of water to replenish yourself and bring yourself back to life. And it's just such a beautiful experience.
When you're doing the Temazcal with more of a working on like a particular issue or shadow work or whatever it might be, is that an individual process or is that also in a group?
It can be both. You have to be extremely honest. So a lot of times when I sit with people, I ask them before they come, there's prep work for one. I have everyone do a type of fast from the comforts of our modern life. And then I ask them, do you come with an open heart, an open mind, and a truthful tongue? What you say in this womb is speaking to the depth of your soul, the truth of your existence. And if you're lying to yourself, you're not going to heal. So you have to be ready for one to speak intensely honest. And sometimes that's the hardest part, is opening yourself up to judgment, not just from the other person sitting across from you or anyone who's in the room, but to yourself, because that's usually the biggest person that's judging.
Yeah. So for anybody that hasn't experienced like this type of heat, like it is super intense. So when I was down in, I went to Tulum with, my parents, my brothers, Laura, and that's how I was exposed to it. I mean, maybe it was a little bit more touristy. I mean, I feel like it was a legitimate Temazcal, right? But it was in the back of a hotel / like bar or whatever it was. So like the experience I think was honored and whatnot. But I guess, so I didn't know at all what I was getting myself into. We were happening to have breakfast at this place, and literally the waiter was the facilitator of the Temazcal. So he hosted this, kind of off the little, if you've ever been to Tulum, there's just like little streets where a lot of the beachfront resorts are and whatever. But he facilitated this more locally also. And anyways, so, he's telling us a little bit about it and just kind of made it seem like, oh, it's like sauna, some cleansing. And it was telling us some of the benefits that he's been able to kind of get for people in healing disease and whatnot. So, I'm into saunas and ice baths. So I was like, oh, it's sauna, let's do it. So, me and Laura, sign up to do this. And, my parents who were just down for it too, and they're, getting a little older, and but they were like, oh yeah, we'll do this, spend this time with Jacob and Laura. And so we woke up the next day to go to this thing, and again, not really knowing what to expect. I think maybe I was wearing swim trunks or something like that, but my mom was pretty much fully clothed. Same with my dad, right? And it's like we're sitting there waiting for this thing to start, and we had no idea what we're getting ourselves into. So, but the ceremony that they were doing, I think it had something to do with north, south, east, and west. Like it was something along those lines, but the whole it was all in Spanish, so I wasn't really comprehending it. My parents both speak Spanish, and there was a translator there too, and she was doing her best, but still didn't really know what the hell was going on. But so I couldn't really follow along with the words that were being spoken. However, the heat in and of itself is going to have its impact on you. It's going to test you. Like that was probably the most discomfort that I've ever experienced. And it's a long process. So, you're in it for a while. But it it was a great opportunity for openness. Like there was something, of what we were letting go. I think was one of the things we were talking about, some of our fears. And I remember, my mom, being there in the thick of this thing with my mom again. And I'm the youngest child, and I've always had this like huge fear of, my parents passing away. And like, it's something I really struggled with when I was younger. Like I couldn't even go to sleep at night because I was just so concerned that they were going to pass away in my sleep. And like, it was a really challenge for me. So to be in this space with them and going through this, and it's like we were all going around the circle, and I think we were talking about what it was our biggest fears were. And, my mom mentions, her fear of dying, and like, and, that just like really like kind of broke me for that moment. Cause like that's my fear. And like, I don't want her to be afraid of that. And even in that moment, I kind of had another realization of like, the role that I play oftentimes in my family and just the way that I'm wired. I'm a big questioner, or I'm a seeker, right, for myself. So then sometimes that leads to questioning other people's beliefs and challenging them and wanting them to challenge their beliefs and whatnot. And, my parents are pretty devout Catholics, and, they don't necessarily carry themselves that way. You wouldn't really know that interacting with them. Like they're hella laid back and chill and whatnot, but they've really doubled down on this later in life. And that's where she's seeking some form of comfort for whatever's come next. And in that moment, kind of understanding how fearful she is of getting older and the next phase of things, I had this realization of just like, dude, like I've been kind of trying to almost shake that for her. And I felt like completely horrible about, trying to influence that, or like, who the fuck am I to even like try to get my mom to question her religion, or, you know what I mean? Or whatever. Like, I was like, damn, like it just hit me as like a really real thing in that moment. And, but anywho, it is a very, very intense, ceremony and healing, I guess, as you refer it to. And it's like very curious again of like what that feels like, or to go through that.
And extremely hot. And I love what you had to say about all of that, because it's so personal to every single person. And when you're in with a few people, especially family members, like you really get to, once the heat gets so intense and it breaks you down, it breaks down barriers. There's also a lot of different herbs that they use and cleansings inside the temazcal that they use. So you smell these beautifully delicious, separate teas that they prepare, and they pour them on at different times to lead to different openings of your energetic centers and your mind. And it's nothing hallucinogenic. It's simple herbs that we would, pick or use. But it's the combination of those things and the intenseness of the heat that just brings you down to this childlike person. And you're able to finally sit in front of yourself in the dark, because it is 100% pitch black in these. There's no light. So you're hot and sweaty, and you're just wet and drenched, and it's hard to breathe, especially when they pour the teas on the rocks and that steam just hits you. It's like a wall of heat. Yeah.
I mean, something that you mentioned, like, taking you back to like this childlike version. So like, I guess how that was for like me and my mom and like my dad and even Laura, is that these people that are like really close to us, we have a very strong, identity for them, or label for them. This is my mom. This is whatever. This is who she is to me. But like in that moment, I got to see her as just her own person, her own human, dealing with whatever it might be. Like, as real as like fear of aging and dying, right? It was like to be able to see somebody who you've always thought was a particular way as their own person, as their own like human, I guess, like outside of the association that you have as their son or whatever it is, was like a pretty interesting moment. But so that's awesome.
I think it's so nice to see like that connection when you really truly see that within your own creative story, you as this human, your own story is completely separate from your parents. They have their own lives, their own story, their own creation. So when you understand that and you recognize that your responsibility is not to entice them into any one way or the other, but to just simply see them and acknowledge them.
Yeah.
And there becomes a whole other level of interest in that person and a whole other level of understanding. And it really humanizes the whole experience as them as a human being.
Yeah.
So I love that you had that within there and you could see the vulnerability between you two.
Yeah. And it was awesome. And I mean, I think that's the power in doing a lot of these things that are even uncomfortable, you know, again, whether it's an ice bath or whatever it is, like it changes things. You get to see people in different lights, you know, and, I think a lot of our challenges are just simply due to not being able to shift perspective and be able to see things from new lens. If that even means, you know, through a practice of breathwork or meditation, that you're able to actually get outside of yourself and even look at yourself from, you know, a bird's eye view. You know, just we need to do more perspective shifting. You know, and a lot can come of that, whether it is through plant medicine or through practices like ice baths or temescals, and where, you know, you're just putting yourself in essentially an altered state, you know, and a lot comes of it for sure. So with, I mean, another like unique aspect of you is like, you know, you having this whole spiritual side of you, you know, being a medicine woman and all that. One thing that I found that was like really interesting to me, and also what drew me to you was, you know, that you do have an actual background also in Western medicine side of things through some of your, you know, what you do also. And for someone like me, who I consider myself fairly spiritual, and I want to believe more in that side of things, you know, it's really hard for me sometimes to believe, because again, I often reference myself as a seeker, and like it's hard for me to believe sometimes unless I've experienced it. Luckily now I have experienced some of these things for myself, so that I can truly believe it. But something about having, you know, one foot rooted in this medical background and then this other just really was interesting to me, because at the end of the day, it's easy for, like, say, a monk to be a monk up in a cave, right? But to continue to have those practices while in the marketplace, while in here grinding it out, playing the game of this Western world, that's what's intriguing to me. You know, your ability to stay grounded and seek these other things, and not and even offer these therapies and these services for people while still playing the game. You know, like, you know, we have conversations about business, we have conversations about all these things. You're a quote unquote normal person. As much as you've been labeled as different, I can label you as like someone that I would normally talk to, and I would never necessarily know about all this other spiritual side of things unless you decided to let it in, versus the other person who's flamboyantly doing all this spiritual stuff when it's like, what the fuck is this even? You know, so has been something that has really turned me off in the past. Yeah. People that just aren't really aware, and they're just doing this for the look or the aesthetic of the actual thing because it looks cool. Joshua Tree is a cool place. Venice is cool, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I agree.
So that really turned me off, like that type of stuff. And yeah, I'm sure it's coming across as a little judgmental, but it is what it is. I felt very uncomfortable in that. I want to somewhat, not that I need an explanation of everything that's happening, but I want that person to have an understanding of like some other component. I don't know. So anywho, that was something that I felt was very interesting. And how has that balance been for you? And do you feel like those two different things pull you in different directions? Does it help you in some of the services and therapies that you facilitate?
Absolutely.
What's that like for you?
Yes. So I love the word balance. I think that touching on that is important. So I have always been leaning into medicine in the Western side. My family comes from a long line of nurses, and it's just something that I was interested in at a very young age. I've always wanted to help. So I started very young, around 16, just helping around in like home health facilities, and got trained right away into like CNA work, and just kept going up. And I knew I either wanted to become a doctor or a surgeon, and took that very seriously, even though I was told you're never going to be that, because where we come from and who we are, and it's just impossible. But as the young manifester that I didn't even know I was at that time, I said, no, I'm going to work in surgery. I'm going to do this. I was fascinated by the body, the mind, and the way the body worked. So it came naturally to me to want that. And I chose surgery as a surgical technologist because I could not stay healthy enough to become a full-on doctor and go through the doctorate program. I did start in that direction. So cancer was like the defining factor of school. But I still made it through and did all the work I had to in the residencies for surgical. And I was able to learn everything I need to know about the human body and the way it works, and even a lot of psychological stuff. I study a lot of psychology because it fascinates me. And it is hugely connected to the spiritual realm, I feel. You have to understand the way the body works in all its beauty to know if you see something spiritual that you're going to speak to the actual body and the way that it works in order to do anything. Because the first and foremost thing is knowledge of what you're looking at, and then the spiritual thing is having the faith to marry those two together. And science has a big role in spirituality, whether people agree or not. In my existence, I've seen those two things marry very well. And even with particular clients I've dealt with, some may call this Reiki. We have a different word for it, but it is more of just an energetic work that we do. You can visualize issues within the body. I can touch somebody and find their pain pretty quickly. I understand the way that works. And then because of that westernized medical mind, I can see their body inside and visualize the muscle, the tissue, the ligaments, and understand where I'm looking as if I was a surgeon and going in and touching it and placing my energetic work on it. So those two things go side by side for me when it comes to that kind of situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gives me a sense of comfort. And, like you were mentioning, like during some of these ceremonies or these therapies, there's a lot of uneasy anxiety for people from a medical side of it, where they don't know what might happen. So I think being able to have you as the facilitator gives a little bit more comfort on that side as well. With all that you do and all that you've been through and all the people that you have helped up to this point, what would you say would be if someone's starting to show a little bit more like interest or openness to go on this journey, what would you say would be a good starting point for somebody that's more curious in pursuing a little bit more spirituality or more healing through some of these modalities?
I definitely think that, number one, acknowledging that there's an underlying issue somewhere, that there's something that you don't understand within yourself and you can't seem to move forward, then it's time to start to talk about it. And if you are able to bring yourself to a place where you can say, I need help, then that is absolutely the first step. I always ask everybody again, trying to understand if they're ready for it and making sure that they understand what's expected. I definitely like to make sure everyone feels very comfortable and confident going in. I explain from A to Z everything that's happening. I'm very well versed in anything as far as like CPR and all those things. So I help them to understand that there's really no real issues or unsafety that happens within that. It's more of an emotional battle when you're sitting in front of yourself. But I tell people, preparing for it, understanding knowledge is power, understanding why you're doing what you're doing, having that conversation about what your purpose and intention is coming into the ceremony, having words of power, I call them, to set that intention. And then we utilize breath work. We utilize high vibrational sound and overstimulation with sound. And then an actual psychological background of cord cutting, we call it. And that's when you use the energetic cords that people have around us. That is a whole other thing to explain, but the energetic resistance that's around us that holds all this stuff in our body, all these cords that you attach to you whenever you have a connection with another human being or a, a happening in your life, you create that memory, that energetic memory, and it stays within you. And sometimes we never release it or think about it, and it stays in that area for a very long time, creating energy that can turn into pain. It can turn into dis-ease. And that's what we're working at, getting removed or moved within the body, so you no longer have that pain, or it becomes more palatable and you're able to discuss it more, which becomes, in a sense, a way for you to heal from that. It no longer has power over you. And we do use some plant medicine. I am versed in psilocybin mostly and hape, and I do use other herbal stuff that is not psychedelic, and mostly tribal prayer as well, which is different for people here in this modern place, but I feel is very important and powerful, not only to honor my training, my culture, but also to share with the world, because connecting deeply with your roots, connecting deeply with your ancestors is something people don't do anymore. So when you teach people that you have a lot of energy standing behind you, holding their hands out to you, whether you see it as a entity or a person or your family member that's passed, this gives you a lot of strength.
Yeah.
And mentally they feel nurtured with that.
Yeah. Yeah, like that. I mean, I think seems more recently, there's been a lot more talk about like generational trauma, and like that being a thing for sure. But oftentimes we tend to fixate on the negative, right? So like there's these moments when we're thinking about the generational benefits, right? Like all of our ancestors that did amazing things, that did great things and passed those things on. Just as the trauma shapes us, all of those beautiful things also shape us. And there's components of that. I remember we were doing a breathwork session up here. Can't remember which one of the workshops it was, but one of them anyways. And then you started playing I don't know, like the flute or something like that, something along those lines. And like, I just felt like deeply connected to that, of that, of like my ancestry, and it's just like, it was a kind of a weird experience, just like to feel fully connected and almost like there was a bridge being made there. And again, in that particular session, I don't think there was any microdosing or psilocybin involved, it was just the music and the breathing that kind of took me there. So that was very powerful. So where can people find you if they're interested in any of this? Instagram, obviously Spacebar, so let people know how to get in contact with you.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm here in Pasadena at Spacebar Wellness, and I do have a Instagram. It's at medicinewoman_Floraina. And I also do like home visits where I do personal group sessions. I do retreats, of course, and day healing dates where we can just go through different modalities of healing or work. We're working a lot together to create events and spaces for people to have a community and be able to just relate to others who are interested in healing. Mm-hmm. And the most important thing to remember is I'm not necessarily saying that I'm healing people, that I'm teaching them to heal themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. I mean, if that's just a little taste, I'm telling you, we do things a little different here at Spacebar Wellness.
That's right.
We really are. I mean, I'm not one to self-promote a lot of what I've been a part of creating, but we are doing some things that you just don't see. It's a nice blend of it all, and at an underlying self-responsibility, self-accountability, coming here, being willing to do the work, being willing to heal, whether that again is a sauna or an ice bath for you, or just in taking time to downregulate your nervous system, or more of a spiritual journey with cord cutting and doing the work there. Like, this is what I would love for things to go the direction of, like this very holistic approach. I mean, not even to mention the personal training things that we do here, right? Like working that, like there's a lot going on here. Mm-hmm. And the blend of all of this is, I think, fully necessary to deal with the life the environment and the world that we're living in,
100%. I feel like that is so correct. the chaotic lifestyle that we have nowadays, this space that you have created has been amazing, just to watch the different types of ways to create balance in one's life. Because what you have here, you've created not just a place to work out, not just a place to come ease your bones. You really take time to look at somebody and say, hey, what are the issues here? Are you not sleeping? Are you not eating well? Are you not getting the right type of workout? What are you lacking? And then spiritually, how is your faith in yourself? How are you feeling? And a lot of times we don't get asked those questions. We don't have the choices. We just think whatever people are feeding to us. So seeing the kind of collective, recovery and offers that we have here to give, it really has shown me how a community can build and how it can really help to save each other and heal each other with just, great conversation and healing modalities that are easily attainable now here.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate the space that you hold for people.
Well, I appreciate that. And, it is what it is because of you as well. So, it's very, very reciprocated on my fronts, which let's wrap this up. But I do want to make a little call to action to my fellas out there. I do have like a really good group of guys down in Orange County, and building some friendships out here that we're leaning on each other to kind of do a little bit of the work in figuring out like why we are feeling the way that we're feeling, through conversation and dealing with some of the struggles of men in this world today. I want to maybe throw out an invite for a group of maybe 4 or 5 gentlemen that would want to join me in a Temescal, get together, have Floraina lead it, whether it's here locally or maybe even putting together a little weekend over in Joshua Tree or somewhere where we can have the land necessary to build one of these.
Yeah,
and do a little work together and be able to dig a little deeper.
That would be an honor.
So that's what I'm gonna throw out there. We'll put that out there. That'll be this episode's call to action to join me in that work, and then figure out some of the details associated with that. But looking to do more, overnights and more work selfishly, honestly, because I get caught up in the day to day of all these things where sometimes I'm not making enough time for me to do some of the work that I know that I ultimately need. So if you're down for that and you're interested, go ahead and Google that Temescal, or better yet, reach out to Floraina at her Instagram and she can tell you a little bit more. So thank you guys for joining me again on another episode of the Barcode Collective podcast, and we're out of here. See ya.